Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the February 3rd, 2026 meeting of the Town of Barnstable's Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee's Capital Improvement Plan Subcommittee. I guess I will call the roll. Remus Pistorius.
Here.
And I, Jeremy Shea, am also here. So let's jump right in. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. Do we want to approve the minutes here? If you've had a chance to review
them? I'm not sure I reviewed last week's, to be perfectly honest. I don't remember now.
We can put them on next week's agenda. That's
yeah.
Let's
If you
do
don't
that.
mind, I don't remember if I read them or not.
Yeah.
I did the one from 2 weeks ago, which I didn't have any comments on, but I don't remember last week's.
Yeah, seeing how Jim's not here either, I would just propose that we put those on again next week.
Perfect. All right. Well, I guess we could jump right in to discussing what we want to put into this report. So Remus, you had sent out your thoughts. Let me just pull them up on my own.
Yeah, Betty, I did not send it to you. Shall I do that?
No, you don't have to send it to me. I'm the liaison. I'm not a member of the committee.
Okay.
So no requirement to do that at all.
Remus, would you like me to share my screen so you want to go over what you wrote?
I don't want to go over what I wrote because unless we need to. Jeremy, did you get a chance to read it?
I did, yes.
Okay. I think we can have a dialogue on it as opposed to reviewing what I wrote. I think that would be more efficient. But if people feel like we need to do that, we can kind of go through the principles of what I set out. Go ahead.
My first thought, and as I've been thinking about this, it was interesting this week. My students, I had them looking at the town property map, and they were doing a little historical research on their own homes. And naturally, their direction then turns to what is the most valuable property in town. And I think it's that question that in some ways drives a lot of where I'm going in my thought process with this private-public partnership, because it's needed. And I think there's a lot of ways to include really important, valuable players in this process. I think from what you had sent out, my main question is where in particular would you see this being able to generate revenue for the town? In terms of, is it the airport? The students, as we clicked around, turned out it was in the most valuable property. The hospital, I believe, was maybe the second one. But looking at how could a partnership with the airport perhaps bring in revenue? And then secondly, would you see it with wastewater treatment as being another place for it? Because it seems like that's where I'd found a number of interesting partnerships with helping pay for construction and operation, but maintaining public ownership of those utilities.
Right.
So I think those were kind of the two worlds I was envisioning, and I was just curious where you kind of had your thoughts.
So I did have a conversation with Jim yesterday evening after I circulated my note. And he kind of, one of the things that kind of came to my attention was that we don't have any examples, right, in this thought piece. So that kind of needs to be, I think we need to kind of think about how we bring in some kind of examples that make this a little bit more tangible for people to get their heads around. That's one. Two, he asked me, is this a means of raising revenues, or is this a means of reducing costs, right? And actually, I said, well, there are actually three pillars. There is, this is a means from a financial perspective. Through private sector participation, you can access financing, right, to conduct an investment operation. Okay, so that's kind of one pillar. And your typical kind of model for that would be your PPP or your build own operate type of model, right? Where you're bringing in a third party to secure financing, design a facility, and build it, operate it, and maintain it, right? So that's one pillar. The second pillar is raising financing, right? So means of raising financing could be as simple as a sale leaseback of a non-essential property, right? Or entering into a joint venture on the development of excess property that the town might have, right? Where or kind of naming rights on a large asset, right? Where you generate, you're monetizing or commercializing existing assets of the town. And then the third is, there are ways of saving money as well. So, for example, there is this concept of energy savings companies, right? So a company will come in, and this would this would kind of might make sense to you, Jeremy. Company can come into a school district and say, I'm going to come in and manage all of the energy needs of the buildings of the school district, right? And through any savings that we realize through investments, improvements, et cetera, that they would finance, right? Those savings get shared with the town, right? So so that's, it's through those savings that they get compensated, the equity providers, right, the operators, but that town also saves by entering into these kinds of arrangements. So I was thinking, at the end of this piece, to kind of bringing that concept of those three pillars and some examples of private sector participation as kind of a concluding paragraph to that piece.
I think that makes a ton of sense. I like that a lot. Because it makes sense. If you are listening and saying the town is struggling financially, what can we do? It's a great 3 levels of intensity that one can implement. Because certainly there are some that are going to be less palatable than others for a variety of reasons. But
and what I try, so kind of the palatability, right, is a critical component of this, right? And so how do you design a program that you can implement over time? So you don't go and kind of try to do everything, right? You have to look at it kind of strategically from, if you will, a programmatic approach. So you start with something like, if you will, low-hanging fruit, right? To kind of get some traction, get some understanding of how some of these things can work, and then you build on that experience over time. So this is not a situation that boom, you get done overnight, right? It's something that kind of requires thought and thought leadership and management, right? And the management it's a financial management issue, it's a political management issue, right? It's a public policy management issue. There are lots of different kind of elements here that need to, and I try to kind of reflect some of those concerns in that note, right? In terms of now, kind of what Jim was saying, the best, what we could hope for out of this from the council is that for the council to say, okay, let's take this and create and I'm speaking for Jim. I hope that he doesn't mind. And create a kind of a committee, right? That can kind of work on this, because there's a lot of complexity to this, right? As Mark, you were talking last week around kind of the legal issues, right? So, these enterprise funds are, they have value, right? That potentially could be monetized, but there are constraints in terms of how you would be able to achieve that in the context of Massachusetts statutes. It's not like it can't be done, right? But there are complexities that need to be contemplated and put into kind of put into the mill to work. But so it is so ideal. Maybe one of the things we kind of recommend is create a group of people, a committee of some sort, right, to look at this in more detail, and maybe focus on areas which are which particularly resonate with the council, right? Whether it's the BOT type of framework for the CWMP program, or one of the other initiatives.
Yeah, and that's ultimately, I suppose, Betty or Chris could comment, but it seemed like last year when we heard from what town council was happy with us is providing just a variety of thoughts that they can chew on. And I think the thing that really strikes me is, you're right, it needs to be a shift in how we look at financially the ability for this town to exist. I think in some ways, I was reading a lot about the bridges. They've come out with the plans and they have the timelines, and the Sagamore, they said, is going to be complete by 2037. And it's a monumental project. $4 billion, but we're looking at a similarly monumental project. And I think it takes a monumental effort. And certainly, one of the things I've really been looking at is how do we get more help in this? There's a program that I tracked down, which is the WIFA. Springfield, it's a federal program, and Springfield, Mass was able to get a $250 million loan. That was their wastewater program. And it seems like the feds are recognizing it. So some things I've just been really trying to dig into is how can we get more help and kind of show to the public that we are confronting something really huge. And I get, Mark, I understand the hesitation to say how much do we think the project as a whole is going to cost, because we don't know so much about the costs. But on the other hand, it's huge. I mean, we're talking in the billions of dollars, and then we have other existential threats to a community, like the sea level. The town faces a lot of huge challenges, and then we also have this list of capital projects that were sent to us that are all needs that the town must address. And on the general fund, $48 million, on the enterprise fund, $113 million. They're really big numbers. And I think what, Remus, you're talking about is how can we as a community reassess how we look at our assets, understand how we can use those assets to pay for really important programs, wastewater certainly included, but the schools is going to be another huge question of how do we do those repairs, and we have all these other ones. So I think if we're looking at this report, being able to provide some concrete examples with some philosophical frameworks, it, at least from how I'm seeing it, would really help bring to reality a solution to a very complex problem that's going to take a lot of a lot more meetings. But I don't know if Betty or Chris want to weigh in, but hopefully that if we are able to kind of express maybe some of this importance that we could see in believing into some really large changes, that it might be helpful for the council.
Yeah, no, Betty, well, I'll chime in. You both mentioned, Remus, you and Jeremy as well, concrete examples. Do you have some examples? I mean, this is very creative thinking, and I always encourage that. But it helps to see some case studies to see what you're talking about. I mean, from the most simplistic naming rights, right? I don't know that anybody's going to name anything here in Cape Cod, but you never know. But do you have anything? Do you have any case studies? Anything to put forward at all? Because that would help people. People always have a harder time understanding stuff that is so nebulous and you know nothing they can grab onto.
So I don't know if we, I certainly don't have any case studies, right? But we can identify examples of where municipalities are using private sector capital or joining forces with the private sector to meet some of their investment needs or save money. Right. So that I think, and I think that's going to be critical, right? For people, like you said, to kind of get that traction and get make it more what's the word? Make it more tangible for people.
I mean, our nonprofits, of which we're inundated with nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
They live and die with private sector capital.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they would never survive without their donors. And,
Correct.
The donors get a lot of, look at Peter Barbie, one of my almost neighbors. He's got his name on the side of the hospital. So,
Exactly.
there it is. I mean, if they'll donate to a private sector entity within the town, why wouldn't the town get in on this game?
I mean, I was thinking about this as I was driving. I had to go to Boston today, and as I was driving back, and I said, okay, we have the Barnstable Youth Center, right? As silly as it may sound, maybe somebody would be interested in putting their name on it for 5 or 6 or 7 years. Right.
That's the perfect example of what was done back when the Hyannis Youth and Community Center was built.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why we have the Kennedy rink. That's why, in exchange for the Kennedy rink, we received a $1.3 million federal grant as well as some large private donation. We have the Butler rink. We have LaRusso, I think,
Right.
on the front of the building. There's been, there were a lot of naming rights when that facility was built, and that capital helped use, that allowed us, to raise some capital to help build the facility. And it's an ongoing effort because now, any naming rights that we have left are done, for a period of time. And some of these original ones were in perpetuity, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But now, any naming rights going forward, I would strongly suggest that they never be issued in perpetuity.
Exactly.
They would, go in, but you'd have to find the appropriate asset. We're gonna have to give somebody a naming right for town hall.
Well, maybe not, right?
Yeah, so you have to find the right asset and their location. Nobody's going to get their name out on Sandy Neck, and name the beach after them or something. But yeah, it's an idea. We've used it. It's worth, maybe we can identify other assets where it can be used appropriately. It's one thing, but you threw out a lot of ideas, Remus, and it's all good. But like you said, you would need to take some time and a deep dive into evaluating where the opportunities lie. We have done private capital for cogen facility out there at the high school, Jeremy. That was financed privately, and then
and what is that, Mark? What's
the cogen facility that we
the cogen. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And we're looking at doing a new one, updating the existing one and replacing it with a newer version, new, more energy efficient code generation facility out there. And that's all done with private financing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're talking about like, if privatizing services is, if you throw that into this conversation, if it's part of what you're thinking, we have done that with the management of the Barnstable Water division that is privately managed by Viola. We only have, I think, two town employees who operate out of that division. It's all privately managed with a contract through Viola for costs in excess of $4 million a year. But if we were to, staff that with town employees and, with the salaries and benefits and all the operating costs that they incur, it could, it would probably be more than that. Um, so there are,
Oh,
we talked about, sale and lease back, that's an interesting concept because that has been done in the public sector. You can find examples all over the internet on that, where communities have sold bridges, for example, so to private entities who then, charge tolls. But those can create problems if not done properly for communities, because now they're stuck with with leasing a facility on a long-term basis, and it can get very expensive. They have a new operating budget impact now, but they raised capital. A lot of communities did this, when they were trying to raise funds to fill operating budget deficits. They were looking at every asset they could find and sell it to raise capital. But it wasn't done for the right reason. They didn't do it. If they did it to fill a hole in their operating budget, that's not a good strategy because, it's one-time revenue.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of examples out there that you could probably dig up on the internet.
The point that you're making, this last point, I think is really important, right? You have to kind of look at this strategically. What is the kind of the purpose of bringing in the private sector participation, right? If it is just to close a hole in an operating budget, well, right, maybe that isn't the right reason, right? But if you're trying to access capital to invest, right, if you're trying to access expertise to save money, right, if you're trying to solve a problem that is potentially better, more efficiently solved, by a third party, or take a risk and put it onto a third party, right, who can manage that risk a little bit better than municipality, right? Then there's rationale. So it is critically important to have a clear framework and understanding of what problem you're trying to solve.
And, I might chime in. It's just something I read in the paper, so I'm just going by that. So we all know Cape Cod chips. Apparently, they started on Main Street, Hyannis, and then they went out to Independence Park. I've gone on the tour.
I'm living in their house. Our
Okay.
house
All right. Well, there you go.
was originally owned by the the guys who started Cape Cod potato chips.
So here's the article in the paper. They say, we're pulling out.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a bad look. And Campbell's Soup is the owners of it now, because of all the buyouts. So Campbell's Soup says in the article, well, we feel bad about this, so we're going to help to create training for the hospitality industry on Cape Cod, because that's like your number one industry. But who's engaging with Campbell's? Did they come upon this as their own? Because this seems like a perfect example of what you're saying, Remus, and kind of to Mark's point, why don't we engage at a larger level, not to fill a gap, but to create a partnership with, a multinational corporation like Campbell's, and say, Campbell's, we saw your idea, but maybe a little bit more. I mean, you're not changing the name of Cape Cod chips. Who talks to Campbell's? I don't know, Mark. Do we work through the county? Because Remus had talked about setting up, yet another committee. But how do we leverage that? I'm going to go to that economic development thing, I think, later in the month. But do you get involved in that? I mean, I'm just throwing that out. How does Campbell's decide what they're going to do? did the Chamber of Commerce talk to them?
Not
Did
at
he?
my level, yeah. That doesn't come to down to my level. Perhaps I was thinking exactly that. Maybe the Cape Cod Chamber or the Cape Cod Commission had conversations with them when if they found out that Campbell was deciding to close, that facility.
Yeah.
Maybe they reached out. Usually they'll reach out to a regional entity to give them a heads up. But I know of no communication. It came not specifically to me, but maybe Jim Kuffner heard about it. I don't know.
Because that's our tax rolls. And, I'm also the liaison to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I don't know if you guys know, the other night, High Point is now coming in. They are addiction recovery. They're putting in a 65-bed facility right beside HAC headquarters, the new HAC headquarters in Independence Park. So there's another one right off the tax rolls. And the CEO of it was there. And I happened to look up his salary. He pays himself over $300,000 a year in addition to some of his top docs. So there's, again, a service we need. But, at the same time, it's like a double whammy. Cape Cod potato chips, our one kind of factory is leaving Independence Park. Independence Park was supposed to be independence for our workers, whatever. And now High Point comes on top of that, pulls it off the tax rolls. It's just like a double whammy. And we're sitting here with no input. We're completely reactive. So that's why I kind of like Remus. He seems to be getting at a proactive. How do we become proactive and start to tell folks that we're open? We're open for business. We're open for partnerships. And,
Yeah, I think, it's a great point. It's a great point. And I think, planning and development over the years has created that website, we're open for business and with resources available to anybody, any entity that's looking to, come into Barnstable and make it its home. They started that several years ago, trying to be proactive, reaching out to the community, looking for, wanting to engage, these players more. And so, it's a great point.
Yeah.
I think it also goes back to that payment in lieu of taxes idea of really, I know Sandwich does it with, I believe Riverview School might have an agreement in place. Certainly the power plant is on town land in Sandwich, so there's a payment in lieu of taxes for that. But I mean, they're big facilities. They're using the roads. They're, the city of Boston, I know there's just stories this week where they're looking at the universities of how can these universities pay, and some do. Harvard has a payment in lieu of taxes agreement with the city of Cambridge. So some universities do, some universities don't. But I think it's worthy of really trying to approach people and say, this is, if we could even quantify it, how much of town services do you get for free, even if it's just roads?
That's where the rub comes, right? We say, that you're consuming, you use our services, our roads, and so forth, and now they turn around and they say, well, we provide the community a valuable service at no cost to you. Well, there is a cost to us.
Yeah.
But the problem with pilot agreements is that they're unenforceable. You can enter into a pilot agreement in good faith with an entity, but they're not mandated to make the payment if they don't evaluate. Yeah, they don't have the financial means to pay it. It's unenforceable. City of Boston has one of the most successful pilot programs in the country, if not the most successful, and it's all with well-endowed universities and hospitals. And so they have the deep pockets to make payments, but Boston only collects maybe a little more than 50% of the amount that they have in pilot agreements because you can't force them to pay.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, they have a website on it. There's actually interesting information. I looked at it when, about a year ago. It's on the City of Boston Assessor's webpage. And take a look at that. He has all the pilot agreements on there and what the collection rate has been on those pilot agreements.
And Betty, also kind of responding, I've been finding a lot of very concrete examples of these partnerships when it comes to sewers. It's interesting Mark mentions Viola because they are kind of the player when it comes to national projects. There's Rialto, California, 2013. They had a 30-year, $300 million project with Viola. There's one in Bayonne, New Jersey. There's a really good article from Knowledge at Wharton, so from the Wharton School. That one looks at Bayonne, New Jersey, and part of that deal provided $150 million to help pay off existing debts that the city had incurred. So there are a lot of these examples where these partnerships are able to fund infrastructure projects like this.
Yeah, you know where Bayonne is?
I don't.
It's they're probably desperate. They're like the armpit of New Jersey. They're right by I guess Newark Airport. I mean, Bayonne is like it's all just docks and
Oh, interesting.
it's a sad sight, but no, it's mostly docks and things.
But there are hopefully there are better places like so I know that Veolia is active in Holyoke in Massachusetts. I believe they're also active in Fall River. Right. So and these guys are it's a I've worked with them. Actually they were one of our clients. They're all over the globe, right? It's a big French company. They have operations in large kind of cities, and they do have operations in municipalities the size of Barnstable. And they have, they've got apparently they are here. I wasn't aware of that. So they've got a lot of resources. And what would be interesting, Mark, might be to talk to them about really what's their interest in potentially getting more deeply involved in the town of Barnstable and kind of using some of their other models that they use elsewhere in the United States in other municipalities to see whether there's any kind of potential meeting of the minds and kind of on an in principle basis.
Don't have an answer for that right now.
No, of course not. Yeah.
So I guess then, Remus, what we perhaps want to direct the attentions to for this report would be a philosophical framework and then specific examples where municipalities have implemented similar programs and how it might benefit Barnstable's finances moving forward to fund these capital programs that we know we have to fund.
I mean, I think the way I would look at it is, we have a significant need, right? Principally the CWMP program, but we also have other needs that are not being fulfilled by virtue of the fact that we're constrained on resources, right? And so there's kind of I think the idea that Jim, my takeaway from what Jim is presenting is, well, you've got kind of these options for raising money as a municipality, right? Through the WIF, through the debt override, through the stabilization fund override, right? And then there's kind of you look at it from the point of view of keep things going the way they're going, or you kind of overlay. And frankly, I think it should be probably a combination of options as opposed to just a single option. At least we shouldn't rule that out, right? I don't think we need to look at it as a single solution. And then you kind of overlay that with, well, what opportunities can we explore, or can the town explore for attracting private sector participation, which can facilitate access to financing, which can facilitate generation of income on an ongoing basis, or a one-off or ongoing basis, and which can potentially be incorporated into kind of savings models like an ESCO. Right? That's kind of how I see this. The one part that we haven't discussed is on the school side, right? And
Exactly.
I don't don't know kind of how we want to incorporate. I don't have a view of how to kind of take that piece and bring it into what our thinking here, because that's a big piece in and of itself.
It is. And Mark, do you know if the schools have been discussing an override? I mean, it seems to me that there's not a lot of other options when it comes to looking at how do we fund these large projects.
There's been conversations at the school committee meetings over the past year and a half, talking about that as being a strategy they wanted to pursue, but nothing officially yet has been brought forward in terms of a request to do so. But there's been some presentations on that subject matter before the school committee over the past few months, dating back to as far as maybe over a year.
Okay.
I think the other thing that we're missing here is putting things into context in terms of numbers. So numbers is really important in terms of, if we're looking at a kind of a 10-year horizon, what kind of capital expenditure budget do we need, would the town need, right? And we know how much, we have a sense of how much we can do, which is pretty de minimis, right? In terms of our own, the resources that we have available to us. We know that there are third-party resources available that the town is exploring and exploiting as much as they can in terms of subsidies, right? And there's probably always additional work that can be done there, but that's a limited pool as well. So the biggest piece is going to be, needs to come from these other alternatives, right? And so how do you think about the pros and cons of which alternative is most useful for the town to use to meet its short-term, medium-term, and long-term needs? That's kind of how I would look at it.
Yeah, I think if we were able to provide some of those pros and cons, my assumption is that would be valuable.
I think where it's a little too early. I think we need to look at this as kind of, I don't want to use education piece because that sounds a little pejorative, but kind of bring some ideas that people can chew on first, right? And then start talking about the pros. Not that you totally ignore it, right? But I would look at it more in terms of risks as opposed to pros and cons. I think right now at this point,
that makes sense.
Otherwise we're going to be writing that PhD essay that we don't have the time, and probably people don't have a lot of appetite to read.
Yes,
I have a question,
that's correct.
if you don't mind. And I'm not sure this is the right forum for raising this, but it has been brought to my attention that early on, when you mentioned CWMP, that's what brought this to my mind, that it was the recommendation of the CFAC that everyone's hookup to the sewer would be assessed $17,000. And then an amendment was made that nearly cut it in half. And the prevailing vote was that it was $10,000. I'm wondering if it's wise to revisit that again and attribute that a more, how do I want to say, a charge that reflects the work being done in 2026 dollars. And would that free up any money at the general fund that would be worthwhile considering? And I say that because those having the sewer hookup indeed are are going to be experiencing a significant expense. On the other hand, it will improve their property. They'll have a sewer hookup as opposed to a septic system that will need maintenance. They will have likely a newly paved road once the work is done. So I just put that out there is, will that shift some of the burden away from the general fund? Sorry.
Mark, how big of a shift does that make?
It's not much. I mean, it depends on, again, it depends on the sewer assessment amount, how far you go. I mean, it's logical to think that, 2021, when the sewer assessment ordinance was adopted, with including a $10,000 sewer assessment, and here we are in 2026, that $10,000 is a lot more now with inflation. And just from an equity standpoint, I think it's a good matter for the council to take up for consideration to adjust that sewer assessment on an annual basis, just to keep the equity in place for people who are being assessed for the build out of the public sewer system. Because, if we keep it $10,000 forever, those who hook into the system later on down the road are getting a much more value, a greater value, because that assessment's not increasing with inflation. But it wouldn't create any capital. Increasing the sewer assessment wouldn't make a big change in if that additional revenue from increasing the sewer assessment were to offset the general fund contribution. It wouldn't be that much, and we'd be no further down the road in terms of finding additional financing to do the next project for the sewer expansion. So you'd just be trading one revenue source for another revenue source.
I understand that people could finance that connection, correct?
The connection cost, they can finance it through the
this 10,000.
Most people can. There may be some people who are ineligible, depending on properties used.
Okay.
I don't think commercial properties can finance through the Aqua Fund, the county's Aqua Fund. I don't think second homeowners or rental properties can. I think it has to be a primary residence that finances through the Cape Cod Aqua Fund.
Are we on track in terms of the sewer connections, or are we where is the town?
Yeah, I think last I heard, the Strawberry Hill Road project, which is like one of our initial large sewer expansion project. I think about 75% of the properties along that are connected at this point. I'm not sure, but yeah, we can.
But as a program as a whole, I assume there was probably kind of a projection in terms of we'll have X connections done by 22, 23, whenever it started through.
Yeah, see, the challenge with the program is that from that standpoint is that we're building the main spines north and south and east and west right now, right? And so along those spines, there aren't as many properties as when you get into the densely packed neighborhoods. So, for example, Route 28 East, when we built that main trunk line that goes back to Bursa's Way down into Finney's Lane Pump Station, there were only, I think, around 150 dwelling units along that main trunk line. But when you get into the Finney's Lane neighborhood, which is a big project that we've had money appropriated to do, you're talking close to 530 properties, I think. And that's really, when you get to densely packed neighborhoods, that's where the connections really start coming in. But as you build these main trunk lines along Route 28, east-west or north-south, Finney's Lane, Strawberry Hill Road, there's not as much density.
I mean, talking about pros and cons, Jeremy, one of the benefits of looking at a build, own, operate type of program is that these companies have access to capital that is much more readily tapped than we as a town can achieve. And so therefore they can kind of get things done in a shorter period of time than what.
Let's say, Remus, we have tremendous access to capital. I mean, we can borrow up to $50 million a year at 0%. through
So
the
when I,
state loan fund.
that I understand, but there's the constraint of you got to go to the town to get that and to the town residents to get that approved, right?
No, no. I
To
mean, we
so
got to go to the council to get the project approval,
right.
To approve the construction of the project, and then to fund the construction, we have access to very low financing, whether it's the general obligation bond market, which is below, the financing rates we get through the municipal bond market. We're talking 3.5% interest rates. So most private equity, which is probably twice that. And state revolving loan fund, we can get it at 0% for clean water projects, and 1.5% for drinking water projects. So we have tremendous access to capital in terms of being able to finance the projects that are approved by the town council. But where we run into the challenge is that we can only afford so much in annual loan payments.
Correct.
Loan payments are a lot less than what you would typically pay for a private entity.
Correct.
But we run out of the resources to pay those loans back, so we can't issue any more loans. So we're at a point where if we need to issue more loans, we got to create a new revenue source to pay those loans back.
Right.
And if you want to talk about monetizing town assets to create a revenue source to pay those loans back, you're talking about the most valuable assets that the town owns to create that kind of vacant land, for example, that can be developed.
I'm not so sure that that's what I'm saying, to be honest. At least I wouldn't look at it from that perspective, right? I think it has to be looked at on an integrated basis, right? So we're not like trading card A for card B. We're looking at the panorama of needs. I think what the town should be doing is looking at the panorama of needs, right? And seeing what are the resources and options and programs that are available to us to meet those needs in the most efficient way. Yes, you pay an equity provider a higher return, right? But you get something done potentially on a cheaper basis, or you get it done on a much more on a quicker basis, and that itself has benefits to it has positive externalities, right?
You brought this up earlier, right? We have to do it within a constraints of Massachusetts general laws, right? So you brought this up earlier. So here's an example. We thought about having a private entity construct an asset for us, and then buying it from them or leasing it from them. But the state labor relations laws will say that, well, you're basically constructing a public asset. You got to pay prevailing wage, because we were trying to avoid the prevailing wage rates, which drive the cost of a public construction significantly higher than what a private contractor could construct something for. So we've tried that before. We've had those conversations only to say, no, you can't do it that way, because you're just trying to avoid the minimum wage laws for construction projects. So it's very complicated.
It's very complicated. I'm not going to suggest. I'll be the first one. I think I said it earlier. It is a complicated process, but because it's so complicated, you need to then approach it in a structured fashion, right? If you approach it in a structured fashion and kind of looking at it in an integrated manner, right? You begin kind of taking some of that complexity away, or managing it in a way that is going to begin to pay dividends. So. Yeah. So what I hear, Mark, is you guys have, you're doing a lot, right? and you're really kind of pushing on different envelopes, right? And I think that's great, right? And like I said, I'm new to this, to our town, right? But I think I've got some ideas around how we can help you kind of put things think about things in a different manner, so that we can potentially solve some problems that are to the benefit of the town.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Yeah, so I think Jeremy mentioned it, and you mentioned it perhaps, the part of the report would include, that next step. And I think that next step would be thinking about creating a group of individuals that can look at this from all those different angles and identify potential opportunities that we could really take a deep dive into and analyze whether or not it's possible.
Or how it's possible, not whether or not how.
Yeah, how. Yeah.
I like to think. I like to think positively. Great.
All right. Well, I guess, Remus, what do we want to do moving forward here? Because practically speaking, we need, Mark, what's our deadline here for needing to produce something?
So
It's early March.
Okay.
We don't anticipate having the public hearings begin at the town council until their first meeting in March, which is March 12th. And so I'd really like to get a report to the council at least a week before that. So that would be the 5th.
Okay.
I think our budget calendar has you submitting a report a little earlier, but if you need more time to, create a thoughtful document, which, you're going in a very different direction this year, which I think is fantastic. I think if we can get something a week before the council, that'll give them time to digest it. They get a lot of material to read. They need time to take a look at this.
So I think what we need, Jeremy, is we need somebody to kind of put together a preamble, right? What's the context? And that the context in terms of from a kind of a global perspective, this is how much money, más o menos, we need to invest over the course of the next 10 years, right? This is how much money we have available to us from our existing resources. And this is the gap, just to kind of put things into context. Then, we have kind of traditional approaches, traditional sources of funding from a kind of a status quo approach, right? Which is the WIF, the debt override, the stabilization fund, and there's a fourth one, I believe, right? We have, and then we have kind of some alternative approaches to that. Either sourcing, getting access to capital, generating revenue, or saving money from the general fund, right? And then kind of next steps. I think that structure would be helpful. Mark, what do you think about that? And Betty too. Be curious. Would that be kind of useful for you as a reader?
I think that summarizes it very well. Taking it from those four steps: preamble, existing revenue enhancement strategies, alternatives, and then your next steps.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, I say this over and over because it just goes on forever. But we're doing our strategy, and a lot of the thinking here really ties in with some of the thinking I've heard from my fellow counselors. I think the appetite is there, Remus, for exactly what you are laying out. And if it's laid out, as you said, it'll be, I think, very well received. We all understand we can't keep doing things the way we're doing, and this is a great opportunity. So I really like it. I think what you've laid out is nice.
So Jeremy, who can take the preamble part of it on?
Between you, Jim, and I would say I do love a good story. So it's I'd be happy to jump into that. I'll
That'd
set
be
the
great.
scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then perhaps I wonder if Jim would be interested in looking at those kind of conventional ideas of the whiff.
Well, and he's done that, right? Did you
Yeah.
see his?
Yeah,
So
he may
he's
have already
kind of,
done so.
he's kind of set out some of the conventional idea. I mean, I do like the way he converts some of his thinking into these charts. And maybe he could do that with this piece that I developed as well. Because those charts, they they become intuitive, right?
Exactly.
That picture, the old adage of a picture tells 1,000 words, whatever. It's so true. So, and then the next steps is kind of it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I agree. I know I will say the concerns I have, and certainly fellow faculty have with the use of AI, that is truly what he's been using. I introduced my students to, and it's able to synthesize and process information in a way. I had him chatting with a 1950s student today. It's great. So yeah, I think
It's incredible the technology that's available out there is. We're in the middle of a revolution that we don't even know kind of what it's about and where it's going or how it's going to end. That has so many different aspects to it. But that's a different
story. Great. Well, I think that gives an awesome structure and something that we can work on. So maybe for next week, if we have some just ideas around it, maybe a little draft for our sections would be beneficial, and then I think we'll be easily meeting that timeline.
Great
Indeed.
Mark,
all right.
I'd be happy to sit down and have a coffee with you and Betty, for that matter, as well. Anytime. Kind of if you ever kind of want to pick my brain or kind of talk about some of this stuff, that's what I'm here for. I want to, give back to the community.
I may take you up on that next Monday, Remus. I'm actually going to be in Hyannis, and maybe I'll get in touch with you if I have the opportunity.
And I was going to say, Remus, maybe you should try to go to that economic forum. They delayed it because of the snow, but it's in February. And
February
I just
9th?
think we need to engage more. All this stuff happens at the county with people speaking for us. Decisions are made. And then again, we're completely reactive to it. I really want to understand how we can get ahead of this stuff.
If we're talking about a week from yesterday, I've got time in my schedule that day.
I'm not sure. I can't remember what the date is. I just can't. I don't know, Mark, if you know offhand, if you know what I'm talking about, that economic forum thing. I don't remember.
I'll look up the date and I'll send it to you.
Okay.
That would be, I think, send it to everybody. It would be an opportunity for, I think, members of the CFAC to go to that. I think it would be a good thing to.
Chris, you might know.
No, I don't know off the top. Is that the chambers?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me look that up.
I would really like us speaking for ourselves. I'm just, coming off the recent experience, with the homeless shelter that was all decided at the county level. So it'd be nice to have us on the ground floor of some decisions. And if you're not at the ground floor of economics, then you're not anywhere.
Mark, how's the county funded?
They're funded with the county tax. Every town in the Cape pays, gets assessed a fee to fund them, and they're limited to raising the county tax 2.5% a year.
Okay.
And then the distribution of that assessment gets allocated based on each community's equalized valuation, your pro rata share of the equalized valuation for all the Cape communities. Cape Cod Commission, which is part of the county, is they have a separate assessment from the county tax, calculated in the same manner, but that is an assessment that we can add to the tax levy every year, because back when they were created, the voters across the Cape voted to exclude that from the limitations of Proposition 2.5. So,
but their budgets are a lot smaller, I assume, than
yes, and they're the county's number one revenue source. And first, they get the assessments for the towns, but that's not their number one revenue source. Their number one revenue source is from the transaction fees charged at the registry of deeds.
Yeah, okay, that's what I would have thought. Yeah. Which is, that's a significant chunk of change for the county.
Significant, and it fluctuates. They've had some really good years recently, post COVID, with the value of. The real estate transactions that have taken place, but they've also gone through some very rough times, and seen
during a recessionary
decreases back during that last economic recession we had in 2008. They lost a lot, saw a significant drop, millions of dollars in annual county revenue, deeds tax revenue. So,
and do if they're running significant surpluses, do they share those funds then with?
They used to. They used to reduce our assessments. Back in the early mid 2000s, we were actually experiencing they were offsetting their assessments to the communities by using some of the excess revenue that the deeds operation was generating. But we haven't seen those in 20 years. They haven't done that in a long time.
Right. That's something to look at, right?
Yeah.
That's a source of savings.
So, Mark, was that a voluntary action on the county's part?
Voluntary, yes. Yeah, the Assembly of Delegates and county commissioners voted to
talk to them.
Send some of that money back to the communities in the form of reduced assessments.
Yeah, we can give them a holler. I did look up this meeting that you were referencing, Betty, and it's not our meeting; it's the chamber's meeting, and the counselors were invited. So it's not. I'm not so sure we can extend that beyond what we can perhaps request. But it's Tuesday. I'm sorry, February. That was the. I'm sorry. February 24, I believe. Yeah, rescheduled to February 24, and it comes with breakfast. So that's what I'm saying.
Well, I'm going to ask if I could invite a member of the CFAC, because I need their brain. Okay. So
I may be out of town that week, but
are you?
I don't know yet. Right now, I'm scheduled to be, but things are a little bit up in the air for us because of some family issues. So I may be here.
So you would probably request Marty from the chamber to bring on somebody else.
Yeah, or ask if we could bring a member of our CFAC. I mean, Jeremy will be in school, I assume, but. Unless he can play hooky, I don't know.
He can skip school.
Oh, I will say, I will shout out the school. They have been so supportive. They got me a sub today to join the 250 committee with Chris. So
we've been double teaming today.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll reach out seriously and ask if we can invite a member of our CFAC.
It's 8 in the morning, 8 to 10.
Okay.
And the featured speakers are. I looked this up. Town Manager Els, Rachel Aiken, Chief Wealth Management Officer from Cape Cod 5, Alyssa Magnata, CEO from Housing Assistance Corporation, and Paul Nedzwicki, Cape and Islands Bridges Coalition. So That's the agenda. Oh, it says space is limited. Tickets are $45 per person.
Well, there you go. $45. Okay. All right. Well, uh, it's the only game in town, and if we're not in the game, then we're not in it. That's what I'm just saying. So many decisions are made by these folks that you've listed. Although I don't know that Mr. Els is really in that group much, but um, if we're not in it, then we're not in it.
He's got a big footprint in our community and on the
Yeah,
Cape. Yeah, actually statewide. He's got the chops for looking at things at the big picture.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Not that you don't, Mark. We have two big Marks here, Mark Milne and Mark Els.
Great.
Anything else from you, Mark?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Well, Remus, we did well as a committee of two today. So maybe I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I propose that we adjourn.
Second. Or all we say aye.
Aye.
Aye.